Morning. A quorum being present, the Subcommittee on Early Childhood, Elementary, and Secondary Education will come to order. Welcome to today's subcommittee hearing. I'd like to thank our witness, Mr. Tony Dearman, Director of the Bureau of Indian Education, and our members for joining today's important discussion regarding the government's management of Native American schools. Under the Department of Interior, the Bureau of Indian Education is tasked with providing Native American children with a high-quality education that upholds their tribe's traditions and cultures. Over 47,000 students in 183 elementary and secondary schools depend on this government agency to provide them with educational opportunities in a safe and healthful learning environment. Unfortunately, so many Native American children are not receiving the education they deserve. Over the years, the Government Accountability Office has expressed concern regarding BIE's ability to effectively manage the schools under its jurisdiction. In 2017, the GAO placed BIE on its high-risk list. Now, that's a list that identifies the Bureau as one of several government programs and offices at risk of exhibiting a high degree of waste, fraud, abuse, and mismanagement. A risk of it, not that they actually have it, but a high risk of it. This is especially alarming for me to hear because it involves children in K-12 education, the most formative and important stage in a student's career as a learner. Site visits have also indicated to members of the committee that schools managed by BIE frequently fail to provide students with an environment that keeps them safe and healthy. 3 years ago, I was a first-hand witness to the inadequate school conditions Native American children are faced with. On a visit to Bugo-Nagashig School in northern Minnesota with then Chairman John Klein, I observed the absence of basic classroom supplies like desks and paper, structural problems, and health hazards like rodent infestations. I also happened to be there in the middle of winter and noticed that I think on that day the school had heat, but I was told that a lot of days the school didn't have heat. I mean, talk about distractions to learning when you're at a school in northern Minnesota in the wintertime and don't have heat. Seeing the problems with my own eyes galvanized me to work more closely with the BIE so that we can improve conditions for these children. We must do better by these students, including ensuring access to safe schools and improved academic opportunities. In 2014, the Secretary of Interior directed the Bureau of Indian Affairs to restructure BIE from a school operating organization to a school improvement organization. This change will reorganize BIE to function more like a state educational agency that oversees the system rather than a local education agency tasked with actual school operation. By reorientating the BIE to a role that will provide technical assistance to schools, the Department of Interior we hope we'll be able to work with Congress and the GAO to rehabilitate BIE so that it's better equipped to serve its students and improve its facilities. Also, according to GAO, restructuring of BIE is currently behind schedule. But it is the committee's hope that with the leadership of the new administration, BIE will be able to accelerate its timeline to deliver better results for its schools and students. As this committee continues to follow the implementation of the Every Student Succeeds Act and BIE's ongoing restructuring efforts, it is important that we continue the dialogue about opportunities to better serve Native American students in attendance at the BIE schools. Today's hearing presents such a chance to explore ideas and initiatives to improve schools and to strengthen education in America, as well as hear from the BIE's director, Mr. Dearman, about what steps are being taken to restructure the Bureau both quickly and effectively. I look forward to learning from our witness about the BIE and the schools under its jurisdiction. I am encouraged that today we can make significant progress on behalf of these students, and even at the outset, I thank Mr. Dearman for his leadership. With that, I now recognize Ranking Member Polis for his opening remarks.
Thank you, and Director Dearman, thank you for testifying before this committee. I appreciate your experience at the Bureau of Indian Education. I know you've been a teacher, an administrator, a line officer in your current position. and of course an advocate of American Indian and Alaskan Native students. It's been well documented that American Indian and Alaskan Native students have had some of the worst educational outcomes in the country, and in many ways have been held back from the kinds of opportunities that other kids have had. The reasons that get the most attention are extremely poor conditions, severe underfunding of schools, but those alone don't paint the whole picture. The outcomes for our Native American students are also impacted by the broader impact of poverty, geographic isolation, a lack of early learning opportunities, healthcare, nutrition, and employment. As a result, improving educational outcomes for Native students requires a comprehensive, systemic, and collaborative approach from all levels. To fix and truly make the 90 Bureau of Indian Education schools work, coordination between the Bureau of Indian Education and the Bureau of Indian Affairs is, of course, critical. To ensure Native students aren't facing unfair suspension and expulsion practices, engagement between schools and community leaders is imperative. Native infants and toddlers should receive early childhood development services, better nutrition, cooperation between BIE and Health and Human Services is also absolutely critical. Only when our efforts go beyond just the educational services will the welfare of Native youth truly be addressed, and the promise of the federal government to meet both its statutory and treaty obligations as well as our moral obligations to our First People will be fulfilled. Right now, the Bureau of Indian Education spending on elementary and secondary education fell by 5% since 2007, and school improvement funding dropped by 76% since 2004. During that time, as an example, the Department of Defense K-12 schools, which serve roughly the same number of students, received an additional $5 billion to renovate their schools. That is a violation of equity. Of course, we respect our military families, but we should also show that same respect to our Native children and our Native families who deserve a quality education. Native students in Bureau of Indian Education schools continue to have one of the lowest high school graduation rates of any subgroup of student. Only 53% graduate in 4 years. Even fewer graduate college ready. Many need remediation. Despite that, the Trump administration in its recent budget proposal recommended cutting further Bureau of Indian Education by 16%, or $143 million. The request also cuts the funding for education and school construction by 44%. The federal government needs to do better to serve our First People, to serve American Indian and Alaskan Native youth, and engage Native communities and families in that effort. I look forward to hearing from Director Dearman about the efforts that the Bureau of Indian Education is taking to improve the management of funds in schools, more information about what additional resources would do and why they're critical, and initiatives that they're taking to increase tribal autonomy and improve student outcomes. I want to thank the chair for holding this committee meeting, and I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. Pursuant to Committee Rule 7C, all members will be permitted to submit written statements to be included in the permanent hearing record. And without objection, the hearing record will remain open for 14 days to allow such statements and other extraneous material referenced during the hearing to be submitted for the official hearing record. I'll now turn to the introduction of our distinguished witness. Mr. Tony L. Dearman is the Director of the Bureau of Indian Education. He began his career in education in 1993 and has served as a teacher, a coach, a principal, a superintendent, and administrator in BIE-operated and tribally controlled schools. Mr. Dearman is a member of the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma. Welcome, sir, and would you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes. And witness answered yes. Before I recognize you, Mr. Dearman, to provide your testimony, let me briefly explain our lighting system. You'll have 5 minutes to present your testimony. And this is kind of a reminder for us as it is for you. When you begin, the light in front of you will be green. When 1 minute's left, it'll be yellow. And when your time has expired, the light will turn red. At that point, I'll ask you to wrap up. And then each of the members up here will have 5 minutes to ask you questions and do the same. And I recognize you now for 5 minutes, sir.
Good morning, Chairman Rokita and Ranking Member Polis, members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the invitation to appear today to provide a statement on behalf of the Bureau of Indian Education. I am Tony Dearman, a citizen of the Cherokee Nation and BIE Director. Prior to becoming director in November 2016, I served as the Associate Deputy Director for Bureau-Operated Schools, Superintendent of Riverside Indian School, and Principal of Sequoia High School. Sequoia High School has had more than 60 students receive the Gates Millennium Scholarship over the past 15 years. And at Riverside, where my daughter attends, we effectively built cross-agency and local partnerships to address the needs of our students. The successes my schools achieved require transparency, collaboration, dedication by everyone. In the year that I have been director, I, alongside my senior leadership team, have been working to bring that same focus to BIE. Today, the BIE supports education programs and residential facilities for Indian students at 183 elementary and secondary schools and dormitories, as well as 2 post-secondary institutions. The BIE directly operates 53 schools and dormitories, while tribes, through local control, operate the remaining 130 through grants or contracts. BIE faces unique and urgent challenges, but with challenges come great opportunity. BIE is focused on allocating critical resources effectively and efficiently to achieve the agency's core mission in service delivery. In February 2017, the GAO released a high-risk report designating BIE as a high-risk agency. As director, I have prioritized closing out all outstanding GAO findings as quickly as possible. Our most recent GAO closure occurred in January, with more closures on track to be addressed this year. In early 2016, the Department of Interior directed the BIE to initiate a reorganization that realigned its internal structure from a regional basis to one centered on the categories of schools served: tribally controlled, bureau-operated, and schools serving the Navajo Nation. To ensure service delivery, the BIE continues to hire positions under this organizational structure as the department moves forward with a proposal for a comprehensive department-wide reorganization. Regarding school improvement, in September 2017, the BIE announced the establishment of a rulemaking committee to develop and adopt standards, assessments, and accountability system under the Every Student Succeeds Act. As of October 2017 deadline for nominations, the BIE had received 30 references, which are now under review by the administration. The BIE will work to develop and implement the committee's negotiated recommendations once adopted. To support this work, the BIE is working to improve data collection and management. The BIE is hiring key personnel focused completely on educational data systems, as well as refocusing efforts on data training for schools. BIE is committed to becoming an organization that is data-driven in its decision-making to better address the needs of our students, schools, and tribes. The President's FY 2019 budget proposes a $742 million investment in Indian education that focuses attention on BIE's core mission and service delivery. Additionally, the budget includes a legislative proposal to create a public lands infrastructure fund, which will help pay for repairs and improvements in BIE schools. This initiative has the potential to generate much-needed infrastructure and maintenance funding. BIE strongly supports this proposal and looks forward to working with the administration and Congress to advance this legislation. In our continued efforts to support tribal school choice, BIE is on schedule for a July conversion of the Pueblo of Acamas BIE-operated Sky City Community School to a tribally controlled school. It is critical that tribes have the opportunity to exercise their authority in education as sovereign nations. We are working daily to reduce the bureaucratic barriers faced by our schools. Last year, we streamlined our policy for hiring teachers by utilizing the accreditation standards adopted by the state in which our BIE school is located. Prior, BIE held teachers to guidelines that ignored the teacher state credentialing, reducing our ability to compete in hiring. Members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to present testimony. With all our challenges, please know that we have great employees bureau-wide who wake up excited every day to improve a child's life. A child who, like my daughter at Riverside, has all the potential to succeed given the right tools. Thank you for your time, and I would be honored to answer any of your questions.
I thank the gentleman for his testimony. I am going to reserve my questioning for last, and now we'll move on to questioning by other members, starting with the chairwoman of the full committee, Mrs. Fox, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Dearman, for being here today. I think all the members of the committee have a great interest in this subject, and we certainly want to support you in your efforts to bring the needed reform to the schools that you are working with. You indicated in your testimony that you are looking at the recommendations from the GAO relating to program management, staffing, school oversight, and you say you're making progress on implementing the recommendations. Can you tell us if the BIE is on track to fully implement these recommendations?
Thank you, Chairwoman. We've been working extremely hard, and we've made a lot of progress. As I stated in my reading testimony, we have closed one GAO out. We have several on track to close out real quick. Let me touch on our strategic plan. We're excited about our strategic plan because as an organization, which is one of our GAOs from 2013, we didn't have a mission as an organization. And what we've done with our strategic plan is we've actually included all of our employees within our organizations, our schools, our school boards, and we've had 5 consultations and 3 listening sessions with tribal leaders. And we're finishing the final touches on that. So that'll close out a GAO from 2013. In 15-121, the financial oversight, we're developing a financial oversight plan that includes 15-121, recommendation 2, 3, and 4 that we're working to close out within the next month or 2. We are on track to close out several of our recommendations. We will address the workforce plan as we finish our strategic plan. We really feel like as an organization that we need to address our strategic plan as an organization and then address our workforce plan after that's complete. So yes, we have been doing a lot of work. Our goal is to be off the high risk by the next Congress, and we're working extremely hard to get that done.
Thank you. So while we're very hopeful the restructuring efforts will be successful, our experiences, too many of us have the experience that agency reforms are just about shuffling chairs around and result in expanding an already confusing and fragmented bureaucracy. What efforts are you making, along with those who are working with you, to ensure the ongoing restructuring actually improves efficiency and effectiveness at the BIE?
With my experience coming from the school level and all different levels in the Bureau of Indian Education, you're right. We've been accused of just taking positions and shuffling around. And until we have a change of mindset and our focus really being on our students and our schools and supporting at that level, nothing's going to change. We've been saying in the organizational structure does not make the organization. It's the people within the organization that make the organization. We're working extremely hard right now to focus on student data and look at support for our schools. And right now we are working forward. Every decision that we make, we're asking, how does that impact our kids? How does that impact our schools? For so long, we have been a push-down organization from central office in D.C. And what we want to do is flip that, and we want to bring up what we're doing at the central office based on the school needs. An example of this, last week we were in Albuquerque with the leadership team. They were talking about great programs that could benefit our kids. And my question was, what are you going to do to help the schools? Because for so long, we pushed things down on school administrators and said, do this. One size don't fit all. And we've got to work alongside our schools to support our schools because they're taking care of our kids, and we've got to provide the support from our level. So that's one of the things that we're really doing is really changing the focus, and it starts with data. So we're collecting the data to see where our needs are.
Well, you are certainly saying all the right things, and we look forward to your success, and we wish you well. Thank you very much. I yield back.
Thank the Chairwoman. Ranking Member Scott, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Director Dearman, for testifying before the committee today. We know the federal government has a responsibility to the tribal nations established in treaties, laws, court decisions, and through the Constitution. In return for that, the federal government has agreed to protect tribal lands, self-government, and to provide federal assistance to ensure the success of tribal communities. One of the most important responsibilities taken on by the federal government is the delivery of educational services. Unfortunately, the reality is that the American Indian and Alaska Native children face some of the bleakest outcomes of any population in the country today. In addition, the conditions of the schools, of the BIE schools, are often abysmal. They fail to attract effective teachers in remote locations. There's an over-identification of students with special ed, and we have unacceptable high rates of expulsion, which contributes to high rates of dropping out and incarceration. Now, Director Dearman, can you tell me how the President's budget affects your ability to complete your strategic plan?
We're excited about the President's budget, and I'll tell you why. I've heard it stated by more than one member, is the condition of our schools. And in the budget, the infrastructure is a critical piece of the budget, and that's something that we need across our school system. If you visited our schools, and we would invite all of you, anytime you get a chance, we welcome you to our schools, but we really need the infrastructure funds to support our facilities. So we're excited about working with the budget because of the infrastructure focus.
Now, you're excited about the budget. My understanding is that the budget cuts BIE funding by $143 million, about 16%. Is that right?
I'd have to review the numbers, but
Sounds about right.
yes.
Would you have been more excited about an increase rather than a decrease?
Congressman, we've all had to make a lot of tough decisions throughout the Department of Interior, and we realize that to make the tough decisions we've had to make in order to get what we really need, and that's the infrastructure.
Okay, and so you are going to be able to execute your strategic plan better or worse because of the 16% cut in the President's budget?
We will continue to move forward with our plan, and I can assure each one of you that we will effectively and efficiently use all the resources that are allocated to us.
I assume you could have used more resources, but let me get to another point. The GAO a couple of years ago found that 40% of the regional facility positions were vacant. What is the status of that now?
Congressman, are you referring to BIA positions?
Regional facility positions?
Regional facility positions would fall underneath the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and I wouldn't have that data in front of me.
Okay. Were many of those positions vacant in the Bureau of Indian Education?
With the Bureau of Indian Education, this is a good time to explain, we have a lot of help within the Department of Interior. An example would be a lot of times with facilities, DASM helps us with the construction. There's facility money that runs through BIA. They have a hand in on us. Our contracts run through BIA. Our internet, IT services run through Deputy Assistant Secretary of Management. So there's a lot of help that we have in operating our schools. Now, with that piece, the regional facility managers, there are many, and I don't have that information in front of me, but we work closely with our regional facility managers, depending on the location of our schools, with what regional facility managers, that'll determine what we work with.
Thank you. Now, many of the students live in reservations or in areas of concentrated poverty. The communities are under resources and lack access to affordable health care, child care, quality nutrition options. Can you talk about the challenges of educating students who live in areas of concentrated poverty, and what programs are necessary to effectively educate children in that situation?
We're reaching out right now and started assessing a lot of our isolated locations because, again, one size don't fit all in our communities. And every community is going to be different with the resources that they have available. There are many challenges in BIE, and that being one. And, in our strategic plan, the second goal addresses behavioral health. Because when we talk about services for our students, this is something in our system that we really haven't addressed and don't have the data that we know coming from the schools. that has an impact on our student performance, our outcomes. So we've really started looking at the resources in the isolated areas and reaching across. We've had meetings with Indian Health Services. We're going to have to really tap into resources to take care of our kids in our schools.
Gentleman's time's expired. Thank the gentleman. My friend, the gentlelady from Georgia, Ms. Handel, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Dearman, for being here. I appreciate your candor in your remarks and your acknowledgement that there really are some challenges to be met throughout the BIE, and your very evident desire to implement the strategic plan in a way that is data-focused and student-driven, so thank you for that. I was hoping you could elaborate a little bit more on your interactions with and support from the Interior Department broadly, and whether or not you believe you have the commitments and the support you need to actually go forward with full implementation to meet that goal next year of not being on the high-risk list.
We have a lot of support from our department. We have bi-weekly meetings with directors within Indian Affairs, and that's our opportunity to address any needs that we may have within Indian Affairs. And then we also have a Department of Interior Operations meeting to where we meet with individuals that, if we need assistance, we're giving updates, we're getting dialogue back and forth of how we can be assisted. And we even have the opportunity to sit down with Secretary Zinke face-to-face and go over any needs that we may have. So the support that we're getting from the department is great.
Great, thank you for that. You mentioned that you have had 3 listening sessions with tribal leaders, and I wonder if you could share with us some of the feedback that you received on the challenges that they're facing right there on the ground in their communities, and how you and your colleagues at the agency are seeking to assist them.
A lot of the comments that we're receiving from tribal leaders are regarding consultation. They're asking straight out, is this a checklist that you're going by? Because are you just coming out here checking off the box and not going to take anything that we've said? And what we've done through consultation is we have addressed every tribal leader's comments, and we'll be publishing that on our website. But the main thing that we're hearing is they want to be at the table, and we believe that they need to be, because they're not our kids, they're all of our kids, and it's our responsibility to work together to do what we need to do. Who knows best than the tribe on how to educate and their needs? In Goal 5 of our strategic plan, we address sovereignty, and there's no way the federal government can address sovereignty of each tribe without having the tribe at the table, and that's a great thing that we have in the strategic plan.
Great, thank you. And one last question. For you as the leader for the BIE, what are your observations and challenges and barriers that you feel that, and also successes and opportunities that as a leader of this entity that you're facing?
There are many challenges that we have, as you're aware of. The 2 that really jump out at me right now would be the isolation of some of our schools and the resources available. The other thing that really jumps out, and again, we've got to do a better job as an organization, is the behavioral health needs across our reservations. Because, everybody wants to really focus on student data, test scores. Well, that is important, but we also need to look at what impacts that. We were talking about graduation rate earlier. As an organization, we have not really focused on data. And I'll give you an example, and I'm coming to my successes, is we've turned our focus on student data. And in the last year, since I've been the director, we've started pulling data. And this is what I mean. We've had high schools reporting 0% graduation rate. But yet our graduation rate is being reported out at 53%, I believe, is what was Congressman reported. It's not accurate, because we have not focused on assisting our schools and making sure that the data is reported accurately. So a success, the challenges would be isolation, addressing our behavioral health needs, supporting each tribe on an individual basis. The successes is that we have tribes ready to sit down with us, and that we are turning the focus on student data to make data-driven decisions.
Great, thank you. It sounds like you're making good progress. I look forward to following it. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I thank the gentlelady. Ms. Bonamici, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Dearman. I do hope that you are going to make some changes because it is unacceptable that our country has yet to fulfill its promise to educate and support Native students. Over the years, the Government Accountability Office has produced several reports citing a lack of oversight, overfunding, unsafe conditions for students, insufficient staff, poor academic performance at the Bureau of Indian Education. Native students in my home state of Oregon are facing these challenges, and their stories are well documented and very troubling. A recent investigation by Oregon Public Broadcasting shines a powerful light on serious concerns about student health, safety, mismanagement, alleged abuse and fraud, and lack of transparency at Chihuahua Indian School. Parents are worried about the safety at the school. They don't find out often about their children's medical needs. Local tribes are worried that students are not meeting academic standards and that teachers and support staff are not prepared to support students affected by trauma. We don't know if appropriate background checks are being done. In fact, there's some indication that they aren't. And teachers are raising alarm about school conditions and student expulsions. Mr. Dearman, I hope you're familiar with the names Marshall Friday, Melissa Abel, and Flint Tall. They were all students at Chihuahua, and none of them is living today. Marshall struggled to access medication for a heart problem. The school didn't tell his mother about the heart problem. He had physical and mental health issues, and he died at the age of 19. Melissa Abel was 18 years old when she died in her dorm room at Chihuahua. She had heart problems. Her roommates were calling for help. The staff thought they were fighting. Response was delayed. Flint Tall was in the wrong place at the wrong time. He got expelled over the objections of a teacher who wanted to keep him in school. She had just promoted him to advanced English, to honors English, but he was expelled. That was hard on him and his family. He did the wrong thing. He drank and he drove. He was 15 when he died. When his teacher found out about his death, she said, "I was furious. I never felt more powerless to protect a kid against people who are also supposed to be protecting kids with me." Mr. Dearman, I'm deeply concerned that Chihuahua students continue to be subjected to significant risk factors that threaten their safety, well-being, and ability to learn and be successful. We need to know that the Bureau of Indian Education is taking this issue seriously and what is being done to support Chihuahua. We sent a letter, 6 of our 7 members of our Oregon delegation sent a letter in November of 2017. We have yet to receive a response. When can we receive a response from BIA? And how will the president's budget, which is cutting funding for BIA, hinder your agency's ability to support these students and students across the country?
Thank you, Congresswoman. Let me address our Chihuahua situation first. I don't have the information in front of me why these students were sent home. To fix situations is we really need to get back to where we're training our superintendents and our principals of our schools of parent rights, student rights. We are actually scheduled to, the last week of this month, we're having what we call an off-reservation boarding school meeting at Chihuahua on campus. And expulsions, treatment, there's a lot of things that are on the agenda that we're going to cover. As a system, what we've done in the past, and again, we've really started working on this, we hire principals and leaders and we give them a key and say, go make great changes, good luck. But there's no support. We've got to get back to where we're training our principals and our leadership over what's available in our system.
And
We've actually
Mr. Chairman, when can we get a response to our letter we sent?
That's actually the responses in the review process, and I apologize that it's taken so long, but it is in review.
Members of the advisory board at Chihuahua say they're continually kept in the dark about financial matters and other key campus issues. What is the Bureau of Indian Education doing to ensure meaningful leadership, oversight, and consultation from tribal communities at off-reservation boarding schools like Chihuahua?
The financial oversight, the school boards are required to sign off on the budgets, and that's a requirement of us, our system, BIE. So I'm not sure why they're saying that they're not privy to the information because we receive the budgets with their signatures. If they're wanting more in detailed information, that's something we can check on while we're there.
I appreciate that. And the Oregon Public Broadcasting investigation revealed that students are being rushed through the system. There's a concern. We want to know what the Bureau is doing to make sure that the students who earn high school diplomas are actually prepared for life after high school, regardless of what path they may take.
And that's one thing that we're really hoping comes through with our negotiated rulemaking. And let me explain our system. Our system, as far as academics, we are located in 23 states. Our schools take 23 different assessments. What we're really hoping comes out of negotiated rulemaking, and with the approval of the committee and the secretary, is one assessment, to where we can, as a system, target and provide technical assistance to one assessment. Right now, our schools in the past and still currently, it's depending upon the local leadership, because as far as guidance from the BIE, there hasn't been any. The successful schools in our system are successful either because of the tribes that are operating the schools or the local leadership. And we've got to get better as a system to support all of our leaders in our schools.
And thank you. As I yield back, Mr. Dearman, we need to do better. These students deserve better. I appreciate your efforts.
Yes, the gentlelady's
Thank you,
time
Mr.
has
Dearman.
expired. I was listening to the answer, and I forgot about the time. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your answers. I'm going to reserve one spot and recognize the ranking member, Mr. Polis, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Dearborn, thanks again for being here. I want to, before I begin my questions, I want to raise one issue so that you and members of this committee are aware of the importance of Native American students in several states, including my state. Over 100 years ago, the federal government made a promise to provide tuition-free higher education to American Indian and Alaska Native students. Colorado is one of the leading states, with Native Indian students receiving tuition waivers, and many Native American students attend school at Fort Lewis College in Durango, Colorado. Fort Lewis enrolls a number of out-of-state students, but under their agreement, the state where the college is located is responsible for fulfilling the federal treaty obligations and covering tuition. Unfortunately, that creates a strain on state budgets as they are forced to pay for tuition for out-of-state students. This burden is frankly threatening our promise to serve Native American students and putting it at risk of being unfulfilled. So I'm very supportive of the bipartisan Native American Indian Educational Act sponsored by Congressman Tipton in the House, which would ensure that the federal government supports Native American Indian students. And I look forward to continuing to raise this issue as part of the reauthorization of the Higher Education Act. I wanted to ask you, Mr. Dearborn, what steps you're taking to ensure that LGBTQ two-spirited students are receiving a safe educational environment within the schools that you run.
As a former administrator, we've supported our students. And what we've done is, up to now, we've been able to handle that local control because of this. Our local facilities know what they have, the capabilities of assisting our students. And for us to push something down again from the Washington, D.C. level saying you will do this would be unfair to our schools. And up to this point, Congressman, I believe our schools have really handled that well in support of all of our students. And how they've handled that situation would be depending upon their facilities. And it changes each year. But our students are being taken care of.
Are the efforts to educate students about the continuum of sexual orientation and gender identity done in the cultural context of the Native American traditions of the various tribes?
That would be dependent upon what we do anytime we deal with tribes is we bring in the tribes. We are not an expert over our tribal customs or cultures, and it would be dependent upon what the tribe wants to include in the lessons.
In 2014, the Department of Education's Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services sent an enforcement letter regarding students with disabilities to BIE. In this letter, the Office of Special Education found that the Bureau of Indian Education Schools were not adhering to the requirements established in Part B of IDEA, meaning they weren't meeting the learning needs of every student. Additionally, highlighted the lack of compliance to establish learning plans and BIE's inability to report data. Given BIE's record with not following through on special education plans, what are your next steps and plans of action to address the identification and services that need to be provided to improve the academic outcomes of students with learning disabilities?
Definitely a lot of training, again, going throughout our system. And it's not just training our staff. I really believe we need to get in our communities to let parents know that their rights. Because we feel like that's been a missing piece, is a lot of our parents in our communities don't know their rights as parents. We have started going out. Just an example, we've been doing collaborative monitoring. where special education goes in with a support team to where our education resource centers are seeing what our special education department is monitoring and evaluating, so that when they leave the school, we have assistance to make sure that all the requirements in the IEPs are being met.
And how can we track that better? Part of the problem was the failure to report on data of special education programs. So what steps are you taking to address BIE's so far inability to collect data on special education?
Again, we're hiring critical personnel within our organization, and we're rolling out training for our schools. One thing that we have not done as an organization is actually told our schools what we want them to enter and trained them on it. We just take what the schools have been entering. So the focus on data training and actually hiring staff outside the schools that can take the data and analyze it.
We're also concerned, as you know, about the school facilities within BIE. The president's budget proposes a $60 billion cut to school construction under BIA. Should school construction be included in any national infrastructure plan, and how would that benefit Bureau of Indian Education schools?
And in my reading testimony, the Public Lands Infrastructure Fund is really going to help us address a lot of our deferred maintenance costs within our system.
Okay, and I yield back.
Thank the gentleman, and I recognize myself for 5 minutes. Mr. Dearman, I appreciate your testimony so far. I also appreciate, like I said in my opening remarks, your leadership. It's no secret in our tribal communities or in Washington, D.C., that your position has had a high rate of turnover over the last several years, and you have been here you're serving in one of the longest terms that we've seen in your position in a long time. So, are you burned out? Are you staying? Are you going? What's going to happen?
Unless I'm moved, I plan on being here for a while.
I think, like I said, with your background, I think you have the ability to provide tremendous leadership, and you have tremendous experience here. And I hope you see this transformation through. I can tell from your testimony that the desire burns in you to make things better, and I appreciate that. Let me first follow up with some of Mr. Polis's questioning to get your answer on record regarding IDEA. There was with the Havasupai tribe, there was an article in the Arizona papers recently, had your name in it. Do you want to respond to that here?
We're still in litigation regarding that piece, but I'll tell you what we've done to address the support. We have weekly calls regarding Havasupai with the school, with the support from DC and Phoenix. So everyone that's supposed to be supporting the school is on the call supporting the school. We've also traveled down to meet with tribal council. You know, as we explained to tribal council, what we've been doing in the past is not working. And we've submitted a letter to tribal council for additional quarters, because we really feel like to really give the support that we need for the community, we're going to have additional space for additional staff. So we're in communication with the council and community members and the school and school board to look at ways that we can continue providing services for our students.
Okay, thank you. As the father of a child with severe disabilities, I would appreciate your attention to that. When I go to different tribal communities, and you know, until recently, Indiana had no tribal community. So you might think it's kind of odd that I go to so many, but I've been to 16, largely in my role as chairman here. And I find on almost, maybe schizophrenic's too strong a word, but a very divergent view of the role of BIE. You mentioned sovereignty in your testimony. You also said it's critical that tribes have the authority to control their schools, basically was how I took your testimony. And I find a lot of tribal communities absolutely want that, and I think they should have it. Then I find some tribal communities, frankly, we won't name names or anything like that, but that say, no, this is the federal government's role, their responsibility, and regardless of the quality of the education, BIEs to do the job. What is your opinion, and what would you have? Like, for example, I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit. If every tribal community in the United States came to you and said, we want BIE schools out, we're going to take over, how would you feel?
In my position, I really feel honored that I'm here to serve our tribes,
Right.
work with our tribes.
Understood.
Yeah. So if a tribe comes to us and says, listen, Director Dearman, we want to take over the school. It's our job to go to work with them and saying, all right, let's get everything ready. There's an application. It's our job to work with them to where they can get the ability to take over their school. So if a tribe wants to do that, we are definitely not forcing our tribes, but if a tribe wants to do that, it's our job to assist to make sure that they have the capabilities to do that.
Right, it seems like it's part of sovereignty to me.
And we do have, Chairman, we do have some tribes that have said, that's your responsibility, you're going to do that, and we will continue.
Understood, okay. I understand that the IG issued a report this week about the BIE falling behind on the required background checks for individuals that work with our children. Let's see, BIE seems to have concurred with most of that. Do you want to comment on that?
In the IG report, IG has concurred with all our recommendations. Now we just have to implement. The only one that they have not concurred with is 11. And what we're going to have to do, again, is work with DASM in order to get a site where we can share the information and track. So we are working with the department with that regarding that issue. We've had meetings with Mr. Tasuda, who's serving as our assistant secretary right now.
Yes, I think he's doing an excellent job already. I'm glad he's there.
Yeah, yes.
Yep.
He's a great support for us. And so we're working with the department to address that situation and looking at individuals that we can actually detail into our human resources to assist us.
Okay. And finally, as I yield back, I'd just like to put on the record that I greatly appreciate your attitude and your answers today regarding the budget. You know, we all live within a budget. And for years, the attitude around here has been, let's throw more money at the problem and things will get better. Well, clearly things aren't getting better, and money isn't just the only answer. And it's important to prioritize, just like every family has to prioritize, just like every tribal community has to prioritize where that money goes. And I agree with you, having been to many of your sites, that infrastructure is a wise and high priority at this time, and we're seeing that gets funded. So thank you with that. We've had some more members join, and I'd like to recognize Mr. Grijalva for 5 minutes for his questioning and comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And, you know, money is not the solution for everything. I agree with that. It's not the only answer. But let me ask you, I think you've been asked about the 16% cut already on the proposed FY19 budget of the administration, the president's budget, to the schools, to BIE schools. And couple that with the fact that you have an accumulative process that has happened to Bureau of Indian Education schools throughout this nation. In the Otham Nation, there is one which has no accessibility, no connection to modern technology, to the internet, and to be able to work. And we know now that that is an invaluable tool in the learning process, and should know that now. The facility itself in disrepair, and you add that one example with almost 1.3 billion backlog of repairs and construction that is needed to bring these schools up to parity and standards that other schools enjoy. That's still part of the debt. And I realize that while money isn't the only answer, I think the lifting of the caps and non-discretionary is an important move, and discretionary. And but I worry that as the deficit and the debt continue to grow, based on the tax reform legislation, based on the two-year deal that was just made, that we'll be looking more and more at support services across the country in order to try to deal with that deficit question. And so I think this FY19 is a harbinger of things to come that the president proposed. Within that budget, and I want to ask you about everything's connected, and particularly in Native American communities and on the reservation, the elimination of Indian Community Block Grant, the Energy Assistance Program, elimination, the Indian and Native American Program, elimination, Tribal Energy Loan Guarantee, elimination within the BIA of small and needy tribes, Housing Improvement Program, Tribal Climate Resilience, Johnson O'Malley Program, and major reductions in social services, cut of 37%, Indian Child Welfare Act cut by 27%, welfare assistance by 11%, rights protections implementation by 37%, job placement and training cut by 35%. Now, living within your means is one thing. Having the floor ripped out from under you is a whole other thing, and I think this is what this budget does. So we're working on dealing with the self-sufficiency and determination and providing the best education possible for Native American students in BIE schools. The interconnection of these other reductions and eliminations within this budget in Indian country, doesn't that going to have an effect on both the quality of education and the wraparound services that Native American communities need, particularly for their children and for the next generation?
Thank you, Congressman. I can definitely take your questions regarding the department, the other branches, back to the department and provide an answer. As far as the education programs, you mentioned JOM. With JOM, what we really focused on in the 19 budget is the operation of our schools and supporting classroom instruction of our students attending our BIE-funded schools.
The connectedness I was talking about is if social services to help the family, which helps the child that's in school learning, social services, it helps the family and helps the child learn. Indian Child Welfare Act that obviously addresses that particular child and their needs. And so if those are being eliminated in the amounts of 11, 30, 37%, there'll be less money and less support services to deal with the whole child and create for that child the opportunity to go into the classroom and be learning ready. And that's why I asked you how those cuts affect the ability and the mission to educate these children in the same way, or attempt to educate those with the best opportunity that they could have.
I'd be happy to take your concerns and questions back to the department. Because again, depending on the locations of our resources and our schools, it's one size don't fit all, so it'd be multiple answers.
Yeah, and
I thank the gentleman. Gentleman's time's expired.
thank you.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman, thank you, and Mr. Chairman, thank you for your leadership, and thank you for being here today and being able to address these incredibly important issues as we look at our Native American schools and our kids. Education is, to me, it's an investment. It is education is that is the key and the pathway to opportunity. And I know that the number one asset we have in our schools is our teachers, and the number one asset that we have within any kind of organization or agency are the people that we surround ourselves with. And so my question for you is, what support and development do you provide to the Bureau of Indian Education staff to ensure that they have the skills and the capacity to administer these programs in an effective way?
Thank you, Congressman. As we've addressed, you've heard me say training, training, training over and over. And the training needs to really be targeted for our specific needs. We've got to get back to where we're training at all levels in the organization. Because right now, and I'll give an example, we go out to our schools, and I keep pointing to this side because I have some schools here present today. In the past, what's happened is we go out to the schools and we're going to monitor, whether it be ISEP formulas or transportation, and we never know, depending upon who's coming to monitor us, what they're going to look at, if they're going to approve, things like that. We've got to get back to where we're really training, pulling out the 25 CFR, getting out training over the 62, the collective bargaining agreement, everything that, any policy or regulations that impact our organization, we've got to get back to the basics and start training. When we go in to our schools, they should know what we're coming in to look at, and they should know consistency is there. And right before we left to come here, we were talking about rolling out consistency and training over the forms that we're utilizing, even to the point of across all three regions when we go into our schools to monitor. So we are addressing the needs and the trainings of our organization, and it varies throughout each layer.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your background, and I think that has prepared you well for the position that you're in now. to be effective. So I wanted to reflect, get your thoughts on that. How does your experience as a superintendent for Riverside Indian School and other experiences you've had, how does that inform your work with the tribal communities?
I'm very honored to be where I am in the experiences that I've had, because I've been a teacher, a classroom teacher with science, so I've been high-stakes testing for a tribally controlled administrator. And I really feel like that with all the levels of leadership that I've experienced throughout the organization, I realize and see the improvements that we need to make. And this is an example. I've been on the service end of BIE. And I'll tell anybody here and everyone, sometimes the services of BIE haven't always been services. It's been pushed down, we need this yesterday, and it's been a demand on schools. And we really need to flip that. If we're really going to make improvements, it's our school leaders that we need to get down and support and in the classrooms. And it shouldn't be a push down, you give us information. It should be coming in saying, hey, we're here to help. What can we do as a resource? We're here to assist and make you better, and not we're here to find what you're doing wrong. Simple things like, as an administrator, we had a hard time hiring staff in the state of Oklahoma because we were competing against public schools. But our own system made it difficult because not only, we didn't recognize our credentialing for teachers. So you could have a state certification and you still couldn't be hired. And we've eliminated them layers because in order to be competitive, we need to be hiring the same people that our state schools are hiring. And so what we've done is we've eliminated the bureaucracy regarding that to where we're same standards as all the states that our schools reside in. Transitional teachers, same way. We've got to get creative, and we've got to be matching what the states are doing because that's who we're competing against. So I feel like my layers of leadership throughout the system, even being in the classroom, really feel like it's given me an advantage as far as knowing where we need to make changes and the angles that we need to take.
Well, I've always believed that education, that we're going to benefit our children, our kids best, and our future, therefore, when we're not a top-down, when we make the education system a bottom-up, and that certainly sounds like something you've embraced and have great experience to lead that. So thank you for your service, and thank you, Chairman. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Seeing no other members wishing to ask questions, we'll move now to closing statements. Mr. Polis.
I want to again thank Mr. Dearborn for being here today. In addition to highlighting the need to address the funding for Native American college students, and particularly Pett's Fort Lewis College in Durango, I also think it's important that we address the damage that the budget cuts in the proposed Trump budget would cause for Bureau of Indian Education schools. I and many of my colleagues on the committee feel strongly that any infrastructure proposal should include funding for school construction, renovation, and improvement. Part of that, of course, is Bureau of Indian Education schools, but there are also enormous gaps of infrastructure across our country. In your testimony, you highlighted that the GAO identified aging BIE school facilities and equipment and how such facilities contribute to degraded and unsafe conditions for student and staff. In addition to school construction's absence from the infrastructure proposal, the President's budget adds harm by proposing a $60 billion cut, 44%, to school construction financed by the Bureau of Indian Education. I think it's really important that in addition to the capital needs, we also address that we need to go beyond simply the services provided in the schools to truly meet the learning needs of all students. We can't separate education from health, from being in a positive family environment, from having the opportunity to have jobs. So I think that together we can continue to explore with this committee the ability to better serve our Native American students. I want to thank Mr. Dearman for your work, both as a teacher and administrator, and now, of course, running the agency, and I yield back to balance of my time.
I thank the gentleman. I also want to add my appreciation, like I said during my questioning period, for your leadership. As I'm getting to know the staff at the BIE, all seem very concerned and very capable, and I appreciate their work as well. It's a hard job. We certainly understand the obligations of the federal government in this situation. We also like to understand the fact that all education should be local, And you don't, as you've expressed here, nor does your staff, have one magic way that's going to work everywhere, not one size fits all, as you mentioned. And you're not going to know. As good as you are with your credentials and the time that you've spent working at these schools and teaching our most precious asset, our young people, you're not going to know any better than local tribal parents and teachers and officials how to best serve. And my expectation and my hope is that this strategic plan works and that you and your staff, along with Mr. Tsuda, help get it done. Because as I've gone to so many of these schools and on so many of these communities, the most precious asset, as I mentioned, is at great risk. It's at great risk. So you're really doing God's work here, and I wish you the best at it. And I know that your hearts are in the right place. And with the right leadership, regardless of the amount of money, we can get this done. So I'll turn you over to that. With that, I don't see any more business before the committee, and we stand adjourned.